Hello and welcome to the Reason Roundtable. This is the podcast of free minds, free markets, and free takes. I'm your host, Peter Suderman. Trump's tariffs are already taking a toll. So we today are going to talk about whether there's anything anyone can do to push back. We're also going to examine the many, many arguments that Trump's defenders are making in favor of the trade levies. But before we get into the weeds, let's talk about what this means to ordinary Americans. And by ordinary Americans, I mean the four of us. So most ordinary Americans are going to feel the impact of Trump's tariffs in a direct and personal way. And I want to start by going around the panel and just asking about the practical effects of Trump's new tariff regime. What is one thing that you are personally worried about? One specific effect of the tariffs that you want to highlight? Katherine, let's start with you first.
The ordinary American I want to talk about is my 11-year-old son, who is pretty upset about the prospect that pre-orders and delivery of the Switch 2, the new Nintendo handheld, is going to be delayed or maybe more expensive. This kid has been saving his money for a long time to afford the Switch 2. And wouldn't it be sad if, because for some reason we decided to impose 24% additional tariffs on Japanese exports, that would screw things up. Also important to remember, the president of Nintendo America is named Doug Bowser. I just need everyone to know that. Thanks.
Did he take that name after being named?
It's his nom de Nintendo, maybe?
Yeah. At least it's not Kirby Bowser, right?
Is the president of Sony America named Sonic?
If only.
Matt, what do you got for us?
I'm not that guy who spends a lot of time, hit and refresh on the 401ks or anything like that. But I would think it's worth mentioning that the money that I've saved up for my daughter's education has declined probably, I haven't looked, by around 14% since Trump got inaugurated. So that's a small thing. But the one I'd like to highlight is that my youngest daughter, who's 10, not 11, so therefore better, has estimated that her diet consists 60% of avocados. And so that 60% just got 25% more expensive because we get, I think, more than 90% of our avocados in this country from foreign countries, especially Mexico. We only domestically produce a little sliver from California, and that sliver only really gets ripe into the market between April and July. So avocados are going to be more expensive. And if I'm buying 10 avocados a week, and I am, for about $2 a pop, it's going to be now, instead of $20, $25. That's $20 a month. My daughter's the whatchamacallit allowance is $20 a month. So thanks, Donald Trump. You just stole my daughter's allowance.
Holy guacamole. Nick, what do you got for us?
I have indigestion right now, Peter. But,
Trump's going to fix that. You're going to be eating many fewer avocados.
I took this task a little bit different, I guess, but I wanted to focus on Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, who laid out one of the great wins for the tariffs, which he also insisted are not going away because they're negotiating strategies, but we're never getting rid of them, et cetera. But he said the armies of millions of people, remember the army of millions and millions of human beings screwing in little screws to make iPhones, that kind of thing is coming to America. And so I'm very happy to see the MAGA future is an America where millions of us are in an army of people using little tiny screwdrivers to screw in little things on an iPhone, which will probably cost anywhere from 40 to 50% more immediately once the tariffs go up, before they're resourced here.
Yeah, there were reports over the weekend of people panic buying Apple gear after some estimates came out that iPhones were going to cost something like $2,300 or $2,400 if they factor all the tariffs in. I mean, we don't know how Apple's pricing is actually going to work on this, but that after if all of this actually gets passed on to the consumer, it's going to be a massive, massive increase in the price of iPhones, Apple computers, other things like that. But I want to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart and my stomach and my brain and my processing power on Monday mornings when we record the show, which is coffee. I drink a lot of coffee. I drink an entire pot of coffee every time we record one of these shows. You can probably tell. And not just when we're recording these shows. I drink a pot of coffee every single day. So do many other Americans. Where does that coffee come from? By and large, it comes from overseas. So Americans produced 11.5 million pounds of coffee last year. That probably sounds like a lot until you realize that we consumed 1.6 billion pounds. So that's 11.5 million made here and 1.6 billion consumed. It was mostly just me on this podcast, actually. Imports keep me and tens of millions of other Americans in coffee. And that coffee is going to become more expensive, harder to get because of Trump's tariffs. Okay, we're going to talk a lot more about this. We have a big show lined up for you today. We are going to talk more about Trump's tariffs and what Congress and others can do about them. We're also going to discuss Trump's big changes to the federal health bureaucracy. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy cutting 10,000 jobs at the Department of Health and Human Services. Also, reader question about steelmanning Trump and his reasoning for things, if you can call it that. What's going on with the TikTok ban, the latest on Signalgate, and more. Joining me to talk about all of this, we have our usual gang of illustrious colleagues, Katherine Mangu-Ward, Matt Welch, and Nick Gillespie. Everybody say hello.
Howdy.
Hi.
Hello?
That doesn't sound very confident. Happy Monday. Happy Monday to Matt Welch and anyone else who may or may not have enjoyed this season of The White Lotus. I sure did. Going to talk about that, too, at the end of the show. We will be right back after this. Hey, Reason Roundtable listeners, Peter Suderman here. Do you know a student looking for a transformative opportunity that supports the foundations of a free society? Reliance College invites students aged 16 to 24 to the 2025 Great Connection Seminar in Chicago from July 26th to August 2nd. This year's theme, Reason and Free Will, dives into timeless ideas from writers such as Thomas Jefferson, Ayn Rand, and Aristotle. Students can sharpen critical thinking skills in small dynamic groups, developing the intellectual tools needed to thrive in a free society. Outside the classroom, they will explore Chicago's vibrant culture, touring museums, trying improv, comedy, and building lifelong personal connections. Parents, this program equips students to think, reason, and act independently. Go to reliancecollege.org/reason to learn more and apply. Registration is just $800, including room and board for the full week with scholarships available. Don't miss out. Visit reliancecollege.org/reason to learn more and apply. That's reliancecollege.org/reason to learn more and apply. Are you feeling liberated yet? Liberated from your retirement savings, maybe? If you haven't checked your accounts, well, maybe don't, because it's pretty terrifying.
No.
Yep. Sorry, it's not funny, but last week, Trump finally announced his tariff plans and what he billed as Liberation Day. Immediate reaction from the stock market was a big thumbs down, with the worst week since the pandemic. Stocks lost an estimated $6 trillion in value. Economic forecasters warned of rising inflation and the increasing likelihood of a recession, and things are looking even worse as of Monday morning. So, is this a done deal? Is there anything that can be done to stop this, Katherine? Who has the authority to push back here, and how would that happen?
I don't know if you've heard of this body, Congress, the U.S. Congress, in theory, has the power to tax Americans. And that's what tariffs are, of course, a tax. The fact that we have fought revolutions over less is not lost on me. This is very much taxation without representation. And yes, sure, we voted for president, but as Stephen Calabresi pointed out at the Volokh conspiracy at Reason this last week, this is not the way. This is actually an unconstitutional process that we are in right now. Trump has declared that we are in an emergency. It simply cannot be that something that has been true for many, many, many years all around the world is suddenly an emergency worthy of the violation of separation of powers. Luckily, in theory, there is a body that can stop it.
So, Nick, I actually want to ask you about that, right? So Katherine mentioned this argument that is going around that this whole thing is totally unconstitutional. The president, under the Constitution's design, does not have the power to levy tariffs. So from the beginning, this shouldn't be happening. First of all, do you think that is correct? And second of all, let's say you think that's correct. We established that it's true, at least between the four of us. What does that get us?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is true that Trump, or let me put it this way, it's true that Congress could stop this. Congress could push back on Trump and say, the way these tariffs were levied and the exact tolls and stuff, this is a bad idea and you don't have the right to do it. He's invoked the law that allows him to do this, and it's up to Congress to do something. And unfortunately, with the exception of, Senator Spartacus talking about virtually everything that crossed his mind for a day and an hour, there hasn't been that kind of serious pushback.
You're talking about Cory Booker's 25-hour speech, which was not one of those things where that Strom Thurmond did, where you the filibuster.
Yeah,
it was just a speech.
But more, more importantly, and Rand Paul has worked to kind of introduce legislation against this. This is the thing. Congress can stop this. Unfortunately, and I'm forgetting which law of thermodynamics it is, but a body at rest tends to stay at rest, and Congress has been kind of like roofied for the past 25 to 50 years. So
but self-roofied, right?
I mean, we talked a little bit about Nintendo products. Congress is Snorlax, in its current iteration. It is a fat load that is falling asleep all the time. And that needs to change.
All right. So, Matt, since Nick mentioned Rand Paul has been leading the fight against tariffs on the Republican side. And it's notable, I think, that his argument isn't just that this is bad policy, that it's costing people money, but that it is bad politics. So what he said last week was that tariffs have led to political decimation. I said some other stuff, mentioned William McKinley. So they're not only bad economically, they're bad politically. And what he is trying to do is convince other Republicans that their seats are not safe if they let this go. Do you think this is a route to pulling back on the tariffs, to getting Congress to finally wake up, right? So markets collapse, people get mad, they check their retirement accounts, they become very upset. Congress does take notice because their seats are on the line. Do you think that is a possible kind of mechanism here for pushback?
Well, it's the only possible mechanism for pushback. I would not bet even a degraded, disgraceful penny on Congress actually doing that outside of Rand Paul and maybe Thomas Massie, maybe not, who knows? Because Congress has become a supine beast. Talk about self-roofying. It's is there a drug that turns you into a lapdog? That's what they have become. And it's much worse now than it was in 2017 during this period of Trump's first term. It's just sort of amazing to watch. Like, you've had an entire career in many cases, and this is Congress. This is also sort of the intellectual establishment in Washington, D.C., the Heritage Foundation, most disgustingly, making certain arguments about how, hey, it's better to have lower tariffs than higher tariffs, right? Stephen Moore argument, just throwing some names out here of people who've been making that argument for decades and are now making the opposite argument. The fact that Rand Paul only got 3 other Republicans to vote for his bill in the Senate that he co-authored, Democrats, to just peel back the emergency powers, the absolutely, sorry, Fred Young, bullshit emergency powers that allow him to declare an emergency because of the fentanyl in Canada crossing the border, that you can only get 3 or 4 Republicans to do that is so disgraceful. There are very few words to convey how disgraceful that is. So yes, this will eventually, we've already seen with the sort of Republican by-elections or the open seat by-elections in Florida and then Wisconsin in the Supreme Court there, that when you compare Republican elected officials in an election compared to that same district that Trump got in November's election, the swing is going to be fantastical. I mean, just like the swing you see right now of public opinion towards free trade. Whoops, that's going up almost as fast as the Dow Jones is going down. So yeah, there's going to be political repercussions, but I fully expect and predict that congressional Republicans will be the very last people to act in any way to stand athwart this and say, what are we doing here? I recommend everyone go watch Rand Paul's speech last week in front of the Senate, because he couched this. Katherine mentioned the revolution. which is a period that I've been maybe talking about a little bit here. Rand Paul's speech is a absolute broadside against monarchy, against the idea that a single person can flip a single switch and throw all of the American and global economy into disarray. They're reshaping. Look at the language that people are using to describe all of this. It's like, well, sorry, look, we have to reshape the global economy. So these are conservatives, lifelong conservatives, going full Lenin over here. So it's disgraceful. It is the only path.
Zero for tariffs.
I also think, like, I'm just nostalgic for a time when public opinion about free trade didn't map onto partisan identification, right?
That's
and
this
has been true for a while now. The end of Trump's first term was a high point for public opinion polling on both immigration and free trade, because people just wanted to tell pollsters that they don't like what Donald Trump is doing. That's happening again. This is the argument we've talked about on this podcast recently of, like, the libertarians were in charge for too long and now they're getting their comeuppance. That's not broadly true, but it was true. And we didn't appreciate it while we had it, that there was a global consensus in favor of free trade, or at least free-ish trade, most of the time ish-ish. And the American people did not have strong opinions about whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. It was just a thing that was true in our lives for a while, and it's not true anymore.
Although, it's actually really true that the Democratic Party under Bill Clinton helped finalize NAFTA and push for free trade broadly around the world. But Clinton was kind of the last free trade Democrat. And it's a problem because the Democratic Party shifted much more to a kind of Bernie Sanders protectionist, position. And what I guess we lost track of is how the Republican Party shifted into that, particularly with Donald Trump. And this is an instance of horseshoe theory where you have both the Republican Party, particularly under Trump, but also the Democratic Party, talking constantly over the past 25 years about how the middle class has been hollowed out and that somehow this has to do with trade. And with trade deficits. And both of those things are wrong. And I mean, I think this is a time to be talking about the fact that trade deficits are not a bad thing. And we all know this. We all know this because most of our lives, we have trade deficits with all of the businesses around us that we buy food from, et cetera. But then we're supposed to believe that somehow it's bad that the United States, the largest economy in the world, is being undercut because of cheap avocados from Mexico, right? Or cheap electronic gear from Asia. And that's wrong. And then the other thing that is equally wrong is the idea that somehow the American middle class has been hollowed out. We're living in Hoovervilles now, and, it's just darkness and ashes upon the land. Somebody pointed out something that I had written in 1996, which was a review essay of about a couple of musical albums, including one by Bruce Springsteen and a couple of novels and memoirs. In 1996, that decade that we all think about now is like, oh, that was a time when everybody did well. And I open it with like clips or quotes from people talking about how god-awful America was, that the middle class had been completely destroyed, et cetera, et cetera. So we're having that same argument that we had in the 90s, which ended with the creation of the World Trade Organization and freer trade around the world, that lifted a majority of people around the world into middle class status, where the American worker kept seeing big gains, except for the financial crisis and COVID. And like we're acting as if the whole premise of what Donald Trump is doing makes any sense. He is deranged and his policy is deranged.
Matt, I want to go back to you because in your last response, you said that Congress is the only vector for pushing back. And I wonder if you think that the courts might play any role here. There's at least one lawsuit that has already been filed saying that Trump's emergency order justifying the China tariffs, basically, as we talked about, because it is based on the fentanyl emergency. They're shipping fentanyl and fentanyl precursors to us is his justification, right? And so there's at least one lawsuit challenging that emergency order, saying that's not a good justification. And there's some reports saying that more lawsuits are coming. Do you think that the courts could be a productive venue for challenging these tariffs and rolling them back?
Yes, and I should revise and extend my remarks. By Congress being the only, what I mean is that if we are going to reattain any kind of basic civic self-respect in this country, Congress
Big if.
has to wake up. Congress has to actually exert itself as a legislative branch from where taxes and revenue are generated and spending bills are written and all of that. And also oversight over the executive branch takes place, and it's not just a rubber stamp whenever your party holds the executive branch and a majority in the Congress. All of that has been, as we talk about literally every week here on this podcast, just degraded and intentionally self-degraded over time. So I want that to be the ultimate venue of where this goes. Yes, the courts can and probably, I think, will at some point clip the wings of Trump. He's itching for a fight on any number of fronts, not just this, but telling courts to get stuffed while we're shipping away legal residents in this country to prisons in El Salvador, which is not a small thing. So he's looking to take this on. If the courts are the only place where there is resistance thrown up, some sand in the gears of the Trump machine, then what you're going to see is a systematic attempt to bulldoze the legitimacy of the courts and to impeach judges and all of this. And we've already seen a lot of intellectual scut work or like trolling scut work in that direction from Elon Musk and other people. So yes, it can and probably will be the place where this stops, because Republicans in Congress are not likely to grow a spine anytime soon. However, if we're going to be healthy ever again as a Republican here, it's got to go with Congress.
Make America healthy again. We're going to talk about that in a little while. Katherine, since Matt mentioned Elon Musk, I want to ask you about another possible route to rolling back these tariffs, an influence route rather than a power route. Rich guys like Elon Musk, who is out there saying he wants a free trade zone between Europe and North America. Also, more freedom for people to move between Europe and North America. That sounds like something you might say. He's tweeting Milton Friedman clips about the glories of free markets and free trade, and like how every little pencil that you use has been touched by thousands of people, like the product of like this sort of mysterious market forces, right? Like, okay, not touched that way, Nick.
Yeah. Your pencil has been touched by thousands of people. Feels like a yucky way to
I
sell
think
free
I'll stick
trade.
with typing. Yeah.
Like, all due respect to Leonard.
Yeah.
But
Do you think that the rich guy influence route, like Trump listens to these people. He brought Elon Musk on as a top advisor to run Doge, or maybe not run Doge. It's never been entirely clear, right? But like, do you think that that is a mechanism that might finally get him to change his mind?
Yeah, so Stephanie Slade had a great cover story in Reason a couple months ago that asked a version of this question as well. Basically, there is a strain in kind of the modern conservative intellectual thought, which is super in favor of closing the borders and closing trade and returning where the U is a V to all kinds of former iterations of this country. And then there's the tech bros who mostly do want to buy and sell stuff and be engaged in the world. I assume that they, like frankly me, thought that this tariff thing wouldn't really happen fully in the way that it did, and maybe it will still unhappen tomorrow. Maybe it's in fact unhappening right now. As we record this podcast, that's always a possibility that Trump will just announce that all of these tariffs have been paused or reversed.
That is basically what happened last time we did a tariffs episode.
That is correct. And there were some rumblings this morning, so you never know. But I do not like to be in a situation where a bunch of rich dudes and a single overweeningly powerful man are just hanging out and chatting and deciding how the rest of us are going to live our lives. And so now and always, the answer from my perspective is not to take the money from the rich dudes, but to take the power from the president.
I will point out that Elon Musk, like Trump, is often incoherent on policy. And if you string together his tweets, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's as erratic as the stock market has been. He is in favor of H-1B visas, and he told his detractors in the Trump administration to go fuck their faces when they were going to take away H-1B visas. This was in December. whatever that means. But then he is also a big champion of replacement theory, and he seems to be in the belief that there has been a massive invasion of migrants who are coming here who are going to vote in elections for Democrats and take away everything that is good and decent about this country. And this is part of the tariff regime. Obviously, Elon Musk has a ton of interest in terms of factories and other things in China. Part of the problem with tariffs is that it makes Donald Trump the king, and then you go and you are a supplicant to the king to say, you know what, I agree with you about everything, man. But my company is important, and I'm going to give you a record amount of money to lose an election for a Supreme Court justice in Wisconsin because I'm on your side. Let the Tesla stuff come through. But, that other stuff, it's all made of fentanyl.
Couple quick tiny points.
Yeah.
One is that on Nick's point just there, Tim Carney, former guest on this podcast and Washington Examiner guy, has a piece out just today saying that the number of lobbyists registered in Washington, D.C. increased by 48% year over year in February. Congratulations, tariffs. And the other one is just that we're talking about tech bros who have Trump's ear, who have influence. Let's never forget that J.D. Vance's chief sponsor in this world is Peter Thiel. He is a tech bro, he is a cajillionaire, and he's been sponsoring politicians who are among the most protectionist in the history of this country, somewhere near power. So thank you, Peter Thiel, for all of these tariffs. You're wearing them.
Yeah, some of these guys did know what they were getting into. I think Peter Thiel was pretty clear-eyed about what he was supporting. But some of the folks who came to back Trump, especially over the last year, who were maybe not lifelong Republicans or MAGA types, I think are sort of like they need to hear Katherine Mangu-Ward's maxim this morning. They are learning this. I've got it on my coffee mug full of my soon-to-be expensive tariff coffee. It says, all politicians will disappoint you and are garbage in the end. I think there's a lot of people learning that today. So I want to talk about the arguments for the tariffs here before we end this segment. There are so many justifications. Trump's team was out on all of the Sunday shows on cable news making these arguments. Some of them were better than others. Some of them contradict themselves or other arguments. I just want to go around the panel, ask each of you to pick one tariff defense, something some person has actually said, and then respond to it. Katherine, let's start with you.
Yeah, I want to talk about the argument that really is, I think, in some ways, it's one of the deeper arguments for these tariffs, and this is, the men are not okay, and we have to help the men, the blue collar men, the men who work in the factories or who used to anyway. And the person I've seen most recently articulating this argument is Batya Ungar-Sargon, who debuts in the Free Press this last week, saying, most importantly, Trump represents the working class's best shot at achieving the American dream that we've seen in 60 years. And first of all, you can quibble with that on the kind of empirical level. But I think, more importantly, just the big question of why in God's name we would reorder our entire politics around this one demographic, which is not even as electorally salient as it once was. Nick painted us the picture of the glorious future where we all screw in tiny screws on iPhones. And I think that's another element of this that's underappreciated. Like restoring manufacturing jobs means that we are restoring jobs that are not always that great. Adam Smith himself had some worries about the psychological fate of those that toil on assembly lines. And so I think just this general argument that somehow
was he skeptical that it would give them meaning and purpose in life? He
was super worried that they would their dignity would be restored and that they would rise again as the voters that Republicans dream of. So I think this is an argument that I'm seeing out there and that I think is misbegotten in a variety of ways.
Speaking of men who are in trouble, Matt, you're not in trouble.
First
Do you need
of all,
meaning and purpose in your life?
I think that assembly lines were invented a little bit after Adam Smith, if I'm not mistaken. Not to fact check Katherine.
Well, it was the division of labor.
Division of labor. So Senator Mike Lee from Utah, in his alt trolling Twitter account, based Mike Lee, or as I like to refer to him as basted Mike Lee, tweeted out the following.
He's so juicy.
What will Trump's haters do if his tariff play brings country after country to the negotiating table, resulting in bilateral trade agreements that make U.S. trade more free than ever? I'm not a Trump hater. I don't hate anybody except for the guy down the street who feeds the pigeons. I mean, they're air rats. What are you doing? But I will say that if Trump's tariff play leads to U.S. trade being more free than ever, I will actually throw a party. I will dance. I will high five him. I'll say, wow, that was a great play. And also, I bet, basted Mike Lee on Twitter, and he hasn't responded yet, $5,000 that is not going to happen because, my dude, look around you. We have just imposed 10% tariffs on countries with which we have a trade surplus and a free trade agreement. Go ahead and sit and think about that, basted Mike Lee. Singapore, Israel, there's another one there, Australia. We have trade surpluses with these people. 0%. What are you going to negotiate? There is no negotiating. What are you talking about? What kind of wish casting are you doing as someone who's supposed to be a constitutional conservative and a semi-libertarian human being in a competitive branch of government? This is absolutely embarrassing. It's amazing to watch how a single person has defenestrated from where he used to be 14 years ago.
Nick?
So I'm going back to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick because, of course, the first question is why does the Commerce Department even exist? But he said on Face the Nation, there's going to be HVAC specialists, there's going to be electricians, the tradecraft of America, our high school educated Americans, the core to our workforce is going to have the greatest resurgence of jobs in the history of America to work on these high-tech factories, which are all coming to America. That's what's going to build our next generation of America. He also talks about how, we need to be able to build our own ships and our own planes in case of war. The shipbuilding industry in America has not prospered despite having massive protectionist laws in favor of it. There are problems here that Lutnick is just not dealing with. But when it comes to HVAC specialists, there are tens of thousands of job openings currently for them. It's not clear how they are related to anything other than a booming economy, which is not going to be made through tariffs. But they have a projected 9% increase annually over the next decade, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The U.S. right now is predicted to be short 550,000 plumbers by 2027. Why aren't these jobs being filled now? That seems to be something that the Commerce Secretary or the Labor Secretary or the Secretary of, fantastic jobs could actually deal with right now.
I will say,
instead, to finish, instead what we're doing is throwing the global economy as well as the U.S. economy into massive record levels of uncertainty. Instead of actually figuring out how do you train people for the jobs that are already here, that are like the next town over. This shows, just a disconnect from reality that is going to punish, blue collar workers. It's not going to help them.
Katherine?
I can definitely tell you a story about how these tariffs are going to lead to more demand for plumbers and HVAC techs, which is that we're not going to be able to buy new HVACs. We're not going to be able to buy new, things that are made abroad. We're going to need more people to fix the stuff we have. That is what happens when you have less money, is you have to fix stuff. You have to fix it over and over, even as it sort of slowly declines in efficiency. And either because we're just not going to have as much disposable income, or because we are literally not going to be able to buy the replacement thing, the new faucet for the sink or the air conditioning unit or whatever it is. This is how you get more demand for those jobs. It is not at all clear what this has to do, as you say, Nick, with how we fill them.
It'll be great. We'll all be working like the mechanics on the beautiful old cars of Havana, right? Where they are doing everything to keep them alive. We'll become little specialists of maintaining the antiques of the past. It's a bold vision. Between that and the tiny screws, I'm sold.
Trump's argument here when he was told, look, the stock market's tanking, markets are reacting very negatively to this. Trump's argument over the weekend was, well, sometimes you have to take your medicine. This is not medicine. This is not something that makes you feel bad for a little while and then it works and suddenly you're not sick again, right? Like suddenly you're healed. This is a crazy plan. This is the opposite of medicine. This is, at most, if things work as well as they hope, this will bring in $1 trillion in revenue. And like I said up top, this has already destroyed $6 trillion in value. And there are estimates from this morning that by the end of the day, it could be more like $10 trillion. That is not medicine. That is economic poison. It's going to ruin the economy. However, it does give me an opportunity to transition to our next topic. Somebody else who's maybe not so sure about taking the medicine, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Wonder how he feels about Trump's you got to take the medicine line here. Last week, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., RFK to most of you, announced that HHS, the agency he leads, would be eliminating 10,000 jobs. Days later, he said, well, maybe not. 20% of those cuts were mistakes and would be rolled back. But an HHS spokesperson said, actually, wait, no, there's no plans to do so. So I don't know what the actual status is here. It's, as with many things in the Trump administration, internally contradictory. Katherine, I just want to ask you about the job cuts generally. You want a smaller government. This cuts government employment by 10,000 or so. How do you feel about this?
I would like to fire most of the people who work for HHS. And I, sure do wish that we could do it in an even remotely coherent way. It's the same answer as always on Doge. I wish I had something like spicy and fresh to say. I think in the end,
we're not going to get spicy, fresh things anymore because of the tariffs.
We can't get them.
Eat the old
from Mexico.
All those
chicken.
Preservatives, or I guess we import the preservatives, right?
Yeah, well, that's the preservatives are like triply forbidden now. Right. So this is, this is the thing that is going to come out in the wash in the end. Is like, I do think many federal jobs will get permanently cut in the end. Like a bunch of people have been fired. It will be difficult to rehire. And like overall, at the end of the Trump administration, I do think like some of these, I guess now we're netting out at 8,000 fired because we hired 2,000 back, but then we didn't. Who knows? Some of those jobs will go away, at least somewhat permanently. And I like that. This is an extremely, extremely costly way to do it. And there's no reason why they couldn't take 6 more months to actually do a real version of the like, hey, what is it that you do here conversation with people, and then figure out whether any of those things are useful in the form of the agency that we want to exist in the future. The reason that we don't do that, the reason that we haven't done that is because everyone in the administration recognizes they are living on borrowed time. Last week also featured a bunch of rumors, including some originating, at least ostensibly, from within Trump's private conversations with his cabinet, that Musk was about to declare victory and peace out. If and when that happens, a lot of this is going to roll to a halt. This is not the afuera that we dreamed of.
Nick, one concern with these cuts is that they seem to target departments and staffers who deal with vaccines, including some of the folks behind Operation Warp Speed, which helped nudge the COVID vaccine into production.
No, it didn't nudge it. It paved the road for it.
Yeeted it.
All right. And was predicated on the idea that drug approval in America is too slow.
Right.
So does that worry you that the people who want drug approval to be faster are being pushed out?
Yeah. And also, that vaccines have now, we all know this about Robert F. Kennedy, who I'm not completely opposed to. I think he has the potential to do good things in many areas, including kind of speeding up the legalization or, medicalization of psychedelics and other things that would be very helpful. Ron Bailey wrote about this as Kennedy was coming in, that there could be 2 paths where he's like, pharmaceutical companies get too many grants and too much ease from the government in terms of controlling IP and things like that, and immunity from lawsuits. Let's make that system faster, have them take on more of the risk, including legal risk, and just bring things to market and let people decide, doctors and patients together. That's one vision, and that's a broadly libertarian vision, which is appealing, I think, to say, the FDA loses its monopoly on certifying products, or it gets changed so that it only has to say they are safe, not that they are effective. Let the market decide. Ron talked about the opposite version of that, which is that Kennedy spends most of his time attacking pharmaceutical companies in various ways by just slowing down everything and making it harder and harder for pharmaceutical companies to bring stuff to market. I worry very, very deeply that the second path is the path that is being chosen here. And again, in the name of disruption, you actually introduce like a whole new river of sludge that is going to coat everything in the federal government and just make it harder and harder for things to get done, all in the name of rolling back the administrative state and things like that. So it's, for me, the message over the past week has been how the incoherence of so many things emanating from the Trump administration is just becoming overwhelming. That we're going to destroy the deep state by actually giving more power to the executive branch and to bureaucrats and things like that. And that we're going to make America great again by walling us off. And then building our own industries, but we're using tariffs as leverage in order to make fair trade happen. But no, because we need the revenue. It's all very confusing and very incoherent.
Matt, all of this is happening at the same time that there is a measles outbreak. As of Sunday, there are something like 640 confirmed cases, 22 states. Nearly 500 of those cases are in Texas, and has reportedly killed 2 children in Texas so far. RFK is now saying that the MMR vaccine is the most effective way to prevent measles, but he's also promoted other treatments like vitamin A. And one of the former HHS officials, the vaccine officials who was ousted, is saying that with the cuts to the health bureaucracy on our current track, we are likely to see more deaths. How do you kind of contextualize and think about all of this? And, sort of you want a smaller, more nimble federal bureaucracy. At the same time, the bureaucrats are saying, well, without us, a lot of people are going to die.
I have a hard time assessing the centrality of the Department of Health and Human Services and whether cutting 10,000 people or hiring 20,000 people, spending this and that, is going to have effects on outcomes. And I think it's hard for most people to figure that out with large swaths of the government, which itself is a problem of government. If government just exists and is large and does things and everyone in it says we have to do those things or else it's going to go bad, then that government grows forever and is kind of forever outside of the reach of accountability. As a change agent, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I actually am completely opposed to him because he's one of the biggest sludge dispensers in modern life about vaccines in particular. And this is something that Ron Bailey's written about, 5,000 times over the last quarter century or so, but about everything. Anytime you dig into something that RFK has said in the past about anything, the 2004 election was...
Are you saying that he's not right about Sirhan being completely innocent of the assassination of his father, Matt?
I'm saying
come on, man.
There is reason to doubt his assessment of that or of the 2004 election, which he claimed in an article that had to be corrected about 75 times that the election was stolen by the Republican Party from John Kerry in 2004. And it's just on and on and on. His cousin didn't kill Martha Coakley, whatever her name is. Moxley. Sorry, I can't get all his Kennedy murders straight. But rather, he had 2 absolutely different, separate conspiracy theories about who was the actual murderer. And one of the people that he named went into hiding afterwards. So on and on and on, this person was approved by a majority of the Senate. Again, congratulations, Senate. You're doing a hell of a job out there. The Peter Marks, who was ousted, the head of Operation Warp Speed, he had a quote that I think should be chilling to some of us, I guess. It has become clear that truth and transparency are not desired by the secretary, but rather he wishes subservient confirmation of his misinformation and lies. That sounds bad. So the contextual, we're going to have a rise in measles deaths in this country, the disease that we thought was, for the most part, eradicated. We might have had that anyways, right? We've had, prior to the COVID, absolutely botched mismanagement of vaccine mandates. which we opposed here on this podcast at every opportunity, that understandably made a lot of people very suspicious of health information and experts in government telling you what to do, forcing you to do things. I mean, amazing things. Like you couldn't play extracurricular football as a 13-year-old in New York unless you got the vaccine. My God, this is incredible. So I understand that there's a lot of skepticism. And again, this predates COVID. In places like where I used to live in Silver Lake, California, there's a whole lot of vaccine skepticism. So people are going to stop taking vaccines. Now you have an actual vaccine denier as the head of HHS. I can't imagine that helps. And the quote, like the one I just read, seems bad. Seems kind of bad to me. So yeah, the context is we are in a deeply unserious place in this country. Period.
Hey, Matt, did you have measles? Did you?
I don't know.
I'll ask the younger people on the podcast too, but I'm just curious.
I honestly don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah, I did, and I saw there's a clip going around on like Instagram and stuff about a Brady Bunch episode where all of the Brady brats get measles, and then it ends. I'm going to ruin it for everybody, but it ends with Alice, the bizarre live-in maid, getting measles at the end. But one of the things that is stunning is the way that the show, like it was, okay, well, one person gets measles, so like everybody's going to get it. And it is fascinating to see how quickly things have shifted. And I had my kids get vaccinated with the MMR vaccines. RFK Jr. was the vector for popularizing the idea, which was wrong and disproven and retracted by Lancet, which published the first major article on it, the idea that the MMR vaccines caused autism. But it's kind of a fascinating thing in a half a century that we went from saying, okay, one kid has measles. I knew kids in my neighborhood where it's the person next to them, the family had measles, and they would send their kid over to get infected.
Yeah, just measles camps.
Did that with chickenpox when I was a kid.
Chickenpox as well. Yeah. The one childhood disease, by the way, which I'm glad is totally gone, you never hear about it anymore, is mumps. If any of you had mumps, I hope not. But I was eating a bowl of Captain Crunch cereal, actually, when I realized I had mumps. At the onset was unbelievable, and it was the most uncomfortable. I've had chickenpox, measles, and mumps.
That's like an ancient curse that you would levy on someone. Like, may you discover you have mumps halfway through a spoonful of Captain Crunch.
I even think about it now. It's But
and children today just aren't going to have that experience because Captain Crunch is going to be so much more expensive.
Yeah, well, and it won't have the dye in it.
I don't know what they're going to be eating for.
They won't have the dye in it.
That's American made.
But the other thing is, like, we miss the romance of polio now, right? Because, polio has disappeared. Maybe RFK can bring that back, too, because he's also on the record. Zach Weisbuehler and I talked with him at length about this. He believes that polio vaccines caused more polio than it ended.
Yeah. So this is my, we need to wrap up this segment here, but this is my concern is obviously I am not per se concerned about 10,000 cuts to a federal agency. All else being equal, that sounds totally fine to me. My concern is that these cuts are politically targeted and that they won't actually end up being cuts because before RFK was actually installed in this job, he wrote or said something, I don't have it in front of me, where he was like, I want to fire all these people, thousands of people from HHS, so that I can rehire thousands of different people and install them in the jobs. I don't know if that exactly will happen, but I'm not totally convinced that these will end up being cuts. But then the other thing is that I think goes a little bit underrated here by libertarians is if you cut staff, but you don't change the processes, you still have big government and you still make it impossible to develop drugs and put medicine into the market that could save lives. And what you end up with is a system that is still just as unwieldy and kludgy as it used to be, except even slower because you don't have the staff to administer it. And so my worry is that this puts us in a place where we are going to have fewer drugs, where drug approval and development is going to be slower and more expensive. And of course, that's going to be in an economy that is getting worse and where everything else is getting much more expensive. This is a bad scene. All right, let's take a break and then we'll be back with a listener question. You believe in limited government. You support organizations that champion the ideals of a free society. But have you ensured that your charitable giving will leave a lasting legacy of liberty? Without a plan in place, your charitable legacy could fade, or worse, be redirected to causes that don't align with your values. At DonorsTrust, we help you secure your philanthropic vision for the long term. With a donor-advised fund, you can ensure that the groups you care about continue to receive support even beyond your lifetime. And unlike other donor-advised funds, DonorsTrust respects your libertarian principles. It ensures your charitable capital remains committed to advancing individual liberty. Your giving should reflect your values, not just today, but for years to come. That's your vision, your values, your impact. Go to DonorsTrust.org/reason to ensure your philanthropy continues to champion liberty for generations to come. That's DonorsTrust.org/reason. Our listener question comes from longtime listener Adrian in California. Is it time for journalists and pundits to finally stop steelmanning Trump's policies? Tariffs aren't a 4D chess move to pressure countries into more favorable trade deals. They aren't a means to an end for President Trump. They are an end into themselves. Trump's tariffs is an essential part of Trump's ideology, much like deportations and limited immigration. Trump isn't very ideological, but to the extent that he is, can his worldview be summarized by an immovable faith in zero sums? Nick, let's start with you.
I do think it's, from a persuasion point of view, it is always good to steelman the arguments, but I do, of anybody that you disagree with, I do think that a lot of the ex post facto kind of explanations for what Trump is doing, suddenly he went from just wanting tariffs. It's a negotiating tactic, right? Everybody was saying too, this guy is playing 30-dimensional, Chinese checkers in a different galaxy. I mean, it's insane. But I do think it is worth coming back to basic points of reminding people trade deficits are not bad. America is not a cinder of what it used to be, and that the best way forward is to create a thriving, predictable economy that is based on simple rules for a complex world. That if that counts as steelmanning, yeah, we should keep doing that and constantly showing the power of the alternative explanation of what is good, what is bad, and what should come next.
Matt, should we steelman Trump's bad arguments?
I think it's always important for journalists, and I would argue even citizens, to understand what people who aim to exercise power believe, what they aim to do, the latitude with which they have to do this. Something that Jacob Sullum did, I think, very, very well before this election in trying to assess what a second Trump presidency would be. If you paid a lot of attention to Trump on the stump, he emphasized tariffs over and over again. He emphasized wanting to replace the income tax with tariffs. So if you weren't paying attention, you could probably convince yourself like, he'll just hand wave tariffs. But if you were, you came to a different conclusion. So it's important to understand where that comes from, because if you just assume that everything is stupid and evil, then you're not going to figure out, you're not going to prepare your own best defense for it. However, I think there's a tendency among people, especially if they like the party who runs or the politician who runs the presidency or any other position, to give them the benefit of the doubt. You should not give anyone in power the benefit of the doubt. Stop doing it. It is not self-respectful.
Katherine, how are we going to steelman Trump's arguments in a world where steel is suddenly much more expensive because of tariffs?
Yeah, well, we already had a lot of protectionism on steel, so there is that. But I think what Matt mentioned about replacing the income tax is worth noting here. This is, I will join Matt's party that he is throwing if a consequence of all of these tariffs is that we somehow do eliminate or dramatically reduce the income tax. It's not going to happen. So I'll also join his bet, I guess. But if it does happen and we reduce the overall tax burden on Americans, dramatically eliminate the income tax, and functionally end up with something like a consumption tax, like there's a path there. It's the narrowest path. It's maybe not a path so much as just like a gap between two trees that we could try to squeeze through. But it does theoretically exist. To me, that remains the strongest case. So if I'm steelmanning, that's where I'm headed. But I'm not optimistic.
A lot of that going around. I am optimistic about your questions, which are just so much fun to read. I love going through them. We love to answer your questions. To submit yours, send your short, succinct, pithy, and otherwise not very long question to podcasts@reason.com. That's podcasts@reason.com. All right, now it's time for our irregularly recurring lightning round. One of the problems with covering the news in the second Trump term is that there is just too dang much of it. So for my perch on Mount Moderation, I'm going to play Zeus and zap each one of you with a question. Like Elon Musk's cars, it is going to be electric. Nick, I want to start with you. Cory Booker gave a 25-hour speech. He got a lot of press. What do you think?
Not impressed. When I think back to the other great filibuster, and this wasn't technically a filibuster of our time, was Rand Paul's denouncing of domestic surveillance on Americans. It was targeted. It was rhetorically brilliant, and it made sense in the moment. This really was kind of like Cory Booker needing a big press hit. He talked about virtually everything. It was just a kind of like blarg, ultra vomit of everything that is wrong with Donald Trump and the Republicans and this and that and Strom Thurmond, who was a piece of shit for sure. But it's like, for God's sake, why don't you spend a day working to actually marshal legislation forward that would stop the things you're most upset about? Cory Booker did great work on the First Step Act. He has worked with people like Rand Paul about marijuana legalization and decriminalization and things like that. Do that rather than showboat.
Matt Welch, one of the things we haven't talked about on this podcast very much is Signalgate, which is Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine, somehow or another got added to the Signal, like the private encrypted chat group of a bunch of top Trump administration officials as they were planning the bombing campaign against the Houthis. That was not supposed to happen. How exactly did Jeffrey Goldberg get added here, since I understand that you're good with technology and you know how this sort of thing works?
First, I reject all usage of the suffix gate, unless it's about the guy who feeds the pigeons down the street. And second, according to The Guardian, most recent reporting, Mike Walls mistakenly saved Jeffrey Goldberg's number months before under the contact of someone else he intended to add, according to 3 people briefed on the matter. So that's the answer to your question, and it's really, really important. The thing that strikes me about all of this is that it doesn't seem to be the best way to talk about attack plans among people in the administration. Not very secure, obviously. And once Jeffrey Goldberg posted his story, the administration very quickly said, yeah, that's what that happened that way. And then everybody else came out and just started sliming Jeffrey Goldberg. Oh, he's the guy peddling, a journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes, a so-called journalist. That's Pete Hegseth, is a guy that peddles garbage. Nobody was texting war plans. They were attack plans. That's different. Elon Musk says the best place to hide a dead body is page 2 of The Atlantic magazine. It's really funny when he tries to tell a joke. The kind of slime machine that went into gear over a journalist, regardless of what you think of him, he was telling the truth. They screwed up. They added him to a list to talk about bombing the Houthis in Yemen. And he wrote about it in, I think, a pretty responsible way. And everyone just absolutely dumped all over his head, even though everything that he wrote, as far as we could tell, was correct. So this says a lot about the polluted informational discourse and exertion of power in this country as it stands right now.
This goes back to the listener question of how should we treat this sort of thing when, on the one hand, the first response from the Trump team is, yeah, this is basically accurate. And then 6 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours later, it's this person is awful and spreading lies and this is all nonsense. You admitted that it was true. That was the first thing that happened. You admitted that it was true, and then they never came back and actually explained how it wasn't true. They were just like, this guy's a liar. We hate all journalists. Katherine, I think I'm struggling to come up with a transition here. Maybe we just don't need one.
You had it. Katherine, you're a journalist.
You're a journalist. That's right. So give us an update on a non-journalistic platform for speech, TikTok, which was supposed to be banned, but as I understand it, it still exists. There's still TikTok.
Right. So the the use of the word ban here is tricky. It was supposed to be
removed from app stores.
And all of that could be prevented in theory if there was a sufficient percentage of American or at least non-Chinese ownership. Biden kicked the can on the implementation of this law, which was passed by Congress, and did leave wiggle room for the president to kick such a can. Trump did it again, and they had a deal all put together. It was this probably pretty complicated deal because, international corporate ownership deals of incredibly valuable corporate properties tend to be like that. They had cobbled together a situation where ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, was only going to own 20% as the law required. And they were ready to go when Donald Trump announced a bunch of tariffs. And though this is an oversimplification, China basically said, the hell you say? And the whole thing just shut down. So Trump has once again announced or will announce that he's going to delay the implementation of this law another 45 days, and they will try again to reassemble this deal. It's ridiculous. The whole thing is a mess. I do think that we are very possibly in a situation where I hate to kind of cast these things in partisan terms, but it's awfully hard for me to imagine any young person voting for a party that took away their TikTok and also made their Switch more expensive in the same week just for funsies. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong and people's memories are short. But as of right now, the TikTok law is once again 45 days out from the present.
And that was just a declaration from President Trump. Not at all clear that he actually has the authority to do that. He may be flouting the law that Congress passed. And Congress
he kind of does.
Maybe in this case. And Congress just doesn't seem to mind. Recurring theme for this episode, Congress is deportation? No, they're
self-deportation.
No, we had a thing earlier, but now I've just totally forgotten whether they're taking drugs or something.
Self-roofied.
They've self-roofied themselves out of caring about TikTok. All right, what are you watching, reading, consuming to medicate yourself here? We're going to move on to our final segment. We're going to start with Matt Welch. Give us your cultural recommendation for this week.
I finally finished watching my favorite television series of the last 10 years with my daughter. It's called Turn Washington's Spies. It ran on the AMC network from 2014 to 2017. 4 seasons, 40 episodes. It's about the Culper spy ring out of Setauket here on Long Island that operated under George Washington and during the Revolutionary War. I love it so much precisely because it's not prestige TV. It's a bit melodramatic. It's a bit silly when they try to tie everything up together in the last couple of episodes. Benedict Arnold does this, and Major Colonel John Andre does that, and all these people. But fascinating, really well acted. Didn't recognize a single actor except for maybe one dude. And just really, it's like a page turner. Really great to watch with a 9 and 10-year-old. 9, then she turned 10 as we were watching. A bit of pillow deployment for some of the ultra violence and some of the brothel scenes. Which I think she peeked through her fingers maybe on some of it. But just really compelling and introducing you to some actual real existing characters who were doing interesting, crazy, daring stuff. And there's an undercurrent of that. Almost no one acts moral when in the crucible of war. Many people try, and they all have to make these sort of degrading decisions. I think libertarians in particular will kind of appreciate some of the complexity that comes with it. But I just enjoyed it so much. It made me really interested and curious about a lot of these characters and things, and just lit a fire under my daughter. So terrific. Turn Washington Spies, AMC. Go watch it.
Matt, you got to check out John Jakes the Bastard.
Yes,
if
sir.
you're into Revolutionary War drama. This is a classic late 70s, early 80s thing.
I remember
starring, among other people, Mr. William Shatner.
Catherine, it's now your turn.
I have no William Shatner for anyone, per usual. I went to an exhibit at the Phillips Collection, which is the gallery right behind the Reason DC office. It was an exhibit of Alphonse Mucha's work. Matt, a close personal friend of yours, a Moravian artist, I think, of the turn of the last century, and just lovely stuff. If you don't know immediately what I'm referring to, you actually do, because his work is everywhere. He's sort of the classic Art Nouveau illustrator. A lot of his work was commercial, right? So it's like soap ads that are the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. Posters for shows, mostly starring Sandra Bernhardt, just absolutely enormous posters that are super cool to see in person. Did I say the wrong
I think
actor?
it's Sarah Bernhardt. Sandra Bernhardt is Madonna's gal pal from the 80s, and we loved her in The King of Comedy.
Yes, we did.
You all were laughing, and I was like, I've said something wrong, but I don't know what it is. Sarah Bernhardt is, in fact, who is illustrated in these posters. But this exhibit successfully does what so many exhibits wish they could do, which is to draw a straight line between the original works of art and their influence in the world. And sometimes you see these and it's like very labored and you're like, okay. But this is actually it's like Led Zeppelin album covers and tarot cards and just all kinds of cool stuff that you can see a straight line from this man's beautiful work to the kind of vocabulary of a lot of our sort of trippy commercial art of the modern era. I recommend the exhibit a lot. Timeless Muha.
After you go see that, I'm interrupting, sorry. After you go see that, if you happen to ever go to Prague, go to the Municipal House, the Obecny Dum, where they signed their Declaration of Independence, a beautiful building. He made a lot of the tile work and original fixtures that are there. You just walk by them, get a rub on them for good luck. Stunning to be living and walking amongst the creations of this, one of the greatest artists who ever lived.
Nick, I think you and I have been watching the same thing.
Yeah.
You want to talk about it?
The White Lotus season 3, which ended last night in a predictable but unfathomable kind of shootout and things like that. What do we have a rule on spoiler alerts? Because I don't want to ruin anything. I recommend watching The White Lotus, all 3 seasons so far. I found season 3 to be disappointing. It was all tease. It was like edging. And there were only 2 moments that really paid off. One of them was the monologue that Sam Rockwell gave a couple of episodes ago, and then the other, the kind of threesome scene that involved 2 brothers that is dimly remembered by them. But I found the critique, the satire of wealthy people as well as poor people in this ecosystem that is the White Lotus super exclusive resort to be less interesting this time around all over. So watch it, but especially watch the first 2 seasons.
I enjoyed it quite a bit. I didn't think it was nearly as much of a drop-off as a lot of the critics of this season did. At the same time, I did think that it suffered a little bit from just kind of recycling many of the same ideas that you saw in the first season. In the second season, there were kind of repeat stock characters and setups and scenarios in a way that sort of feels like, okay, we need to move on from this somehow or another, while I guess still sticking with the we're going to super exclusive resorts format. Not quite sure how that's going to work if we end up with a 4th season. I do think this one was worth watching. A lot of great acting and writing, and it's just beautiful and sort of there's a kind of entrancing ennui to it all that I enjoyed. But it's just not. It wasn't quite as satisfying as season 1 and season 2. Okay, before we go, Nick, do you have any announcements you want to make? Events happening in New York? Things you want to tell people about?
Yeah, we have an event happening on April 8th. It's a Reason Speakeasy with Dr. Jeff Singer, who has a new book out. He is a surgeon and a Cato health policy analyst. It's called Your Body, Your Health. It is a cri de coeur for maximizing, if that's a word, maximizing patient autonomy, your ability to decide how you do your healthcare across the board. Go to reason.com/events to get tickets, which are dwindling because the supply has been overwhelming, because this is something that there are no tariffs for, at least not yet.
And there are no tariffs for supporting Reason, as some folks have done. We want to say thank you to a bunch of people who have made this podcast and many other things that we do here at Reason possible. Daniel Higgins, Charles Dirk Hoop, Eric Larson, Ryan Siebel, Hendrik and Karen Sharples, Bruce Copeland, Benjamin Freeman. Thank you so much for making this podcast possible, everything we do here at Reason. If you would like to support our work, you can go to reason.com/donate. That's reason.com/donate. And you can tune in and subscribe and tell your friends about the Reason Roundtable. We will return just like Thunderball.